Hey guys, we are back for Kenneth Graham's Wind in the Willows, Chapter 3. Make sure you pay close attention to the details because you're going to have to answer questions at the end. As always, you will be answering them with... Oh, dang it, I thought you could do it on your own right there. Let's try that again. You have to answer the questions with... Oh, let's try one more time. With what? Complete sentences. All right, let's get started with Chapter 3, titled The Wild Wood. The mole had long wanted to meet the badger face to face, but whenever he mentioned his wish to the water rat, the rat would say, "Badger'll turn up someday." "Couldn't you invite him here?" asked the mole. "He wouldn't come," replied the rat simply. "Well, then, supposing we visit him?" "Oh, he wouldn't like that at all," said the rat. "Besides, he lives in the middle of the wildwood." "You told me the wildwood was all right." "But we won't go there today," replied the rat. "It's a long way, and Badger wouldn't be home. It's summertime. He'll be coming along." The mole had settled for this, but the badger never came along. During the summer, the mole found other things to keep him entertained. But when fall came, and then winter, and cold and frost and soggy mud kept them much indoors, the mole found himself thinking again of the mystery of the solitary gray badger. In the wintertime, the rat slept a great deal. During his short day, he sometimes scribbled poetry or did some other small household tasks. This left the mole with a good deal of spare time on his hands. One afternoon, while the rat dozed in his armchair before the fire, the mole decided to go out by himself and explore the wild wood, and perhaps stop by and meet Mr. Badger. Since it was winter, the badger should be home. It was a cold afternoon when the mole slipped out of the warm parlor into the open air. He scampered toward the wildwood. At first, there was nothing to alarm him. Twigs snapped, logs tripped him, but this was rather fun and exciting. Soon, however, all became very still. The trees seemed to close in on him. The sun began to set, draining away like floodwater. Then the faces began. He saw a little evil, wedge-shaped face, looking out from a hole. Then it vanished. Mole quickened his pace, telling himself he was imagining things. But from every hole, far and near, hundreds of faces with hard eyes popped out, flashing, then disappearing. Becoming fearful, he swung off the path and plunged into the darkening woods. Then the whistling began. It was behind him. He hurried forward. Then he heard whistling ahead of him. He paused, not knowing which way to go. Then the whistling rose up from both sides. He was alone and unarmed, and far from any help. The night was closing in. Then the pattering began. He thought it was only falling leaves at first, but it grew into a pat, pat, pat of little feet. A rabbit came running toward him through the trees. "Get out of this, you fool! Get out!" The mole heard the rabbit mutter as he disappeared down into a burrow. The pattering increased. In panic, Mole began to run. At last he ducked into a dark hollow of an old beech tree, hiding from the terror of the wild wood. Meantime, the rat dozed by the fireside until a coal slipped when he woke with a jump. "Moley!" he called. There was no answer. The rat got up and went into the hall. The mole's cap was missing from its peg and his boots were gone. The rat left the house and looked over the muddy ground outside. There were Mole's boot prints, leading right to the wild wood. Without hesitation, the rat went back in, strapped a belt around his waist, shoved on a pair of pistols, picked up a thick club, and set off for the wild wood at a rapid pace. He hunted through the wood for an hour or more, calling out cheerfully, "Moley, it's Old Rat!" At last, to his joy, he heard a little answering cry. Guiding himself by the sound, he made his way to the foot of an old beech tree. And from out of the hole, at its base, came a feeble voice saying, "Ratty, is that you?" The rat crept into the hollow of the tree. "Rat!" cried the mole. "I've been so frightened." "You shouldn't have come here, mole," said the rat with a warm laugh. "We riverbankers, we hardly ever come out here by ourselves." The mole was cheered by the rat's laughter. "We really must start for home," said the rat. "Dear Ratty," said the poor mole, "I'm simply worn out with fear. You must let me rest here a while longer." "Oh, all right," said the rat. "Have at it." So the mole dropped off to sleep. When at last the mole awoke, the rat looked out of the hole and said quietly, "Oh, bother." "What's up?" asked the mole. "Snow is up," replied the rat. Everything had been covered in white. "The worst of it is, I don't exactly know where we are. And now this snow makes everything look so different. We'll just have to do our best as we try to get back home." An hour or two later, they had lost all track of time. They stopped and sat down on a fallen log. They were cold and wet, tired and aching, and bruised from falling snow. There seemed to be no end to this wildwood, and no beginning. There's a sort of a valley down here," said the rat. "We'll make our way down into that and find some sort of shelter out of the snow and wind." Once more they got on their feet and struggled down into the valley in the moonlight. Suddenly, the mole tripped and fell forward on his face. "Oh, my leg!" he cried. "Let's have a look," said the rat kindly. "My, you've cut your shin." He rapped the cut. "I must have tripped over a stump." "No, it's too clean a cut." And then the rat thinking, "I wonder." Then the rat started digging and scratching and soon cried, "Hooray!" "Well, what have you found?" asked the mole. "Come on and see," said the delighted rat. The mole hobbled over up to the spot. "Well," the mole said slowly, "a boot scraper?" "Why get excited over something you scrape your boots on?" "You dull-witted animal," the rat said, and began digging again. In a few moments, he had uncovered a very shabby doormat. "There! What does that tell you, you thick-headed beast?" exclaimed the rat. "Nothing, whatever you maddening rodent." "Do you mean to say," cried the excited rat, "that this doormat doesn't tell you anything? Now look here, you! Scrape and scratch and dig and hunt around, especially if you want to sleep dry and warm tonight." The rat started digging with fury. The mole followed, but mostly because he thought his friend had gone snow crazy. After some 10 minutes of hard work, the rat felt his club strike something that sounded hollow. In the side of a snowbank stood a solid-looking little door. Below the bell pull was a neatly engraved brass plate that read, "Mr. Badger." The mole fell backward on the snow. "Rat," he cried, "you found the boot scraper, and then you found this doormat, then the door, all because you thought it through." "I suppose you're going to sit on the snow all night and talk," interrupted the rat. "Pull on that bell. Pull, as I knock." While the rat attacked the door with his club, the mole sprang up at the bell pull, and from quite a long way off, they could faintly hear a deep-toned doorbell. All right, so that is the end of chapter 3. Remember to answer your questions with those complete sentences, no one-word answers. Make sure you use a capital and end each sentence with a period. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 4.